Hello. Hello, and welcome back to another Scholars of Silverlight video.
Yay!
Yay! The crowd goes
Welcome,
wild.
everyone.
Welcome, everyone. If you are new here and you're wondering what is happening, who are these two people talking about Silverlight? What? We have an introduction video which we can link down below, and you can just check it out. We are two fantasy fans, and we decided to create a channel to talk about fantasy. And right now we're talking about the Cosmere. This is what inspired us. Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson. And today we have an exciting video. At least I find it exciting. Because this delves deep into the lore, right, Sophia?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, if you haven't read a fair amount, I'm not going to say everything. I don't think you necessarily need to have read everything in the Cosmere to watch this video. But if you haven't read anything, then maybe this is not the video for you, and I would recommend that you go back and watch our first video because that one is for you.
Indubitably, that is the case. I think that this video is going to be very spoilery. So you could maybe watch the first part if you have heard of the term Adonalsium and you wonder what in the world or what in the Cosmere is that. But the further along we get, the more we will be spoiling what happens in some of the series and some of the books. And so I think it is safe to say that you will be spoiled here. So
yes, definitely. And I think if you haven't read First Era Mistborn,
yes, we will spoil that.
that will be very much spoiled in this video. At the very least, they'll probably
and
be
Wind and
spoiled
Truth.
for some other things. Yeah, Wind and Truth as well. Probably not so much the other works in terms of specifics, but yeah, we urge caution.
Oh yes, Sophia, I have, unbeknownst to you, added a topic that we.
Oh, okay. I was
as we were talking,
excited to find out what that is.
you have inspired me with your intro. Okay. So let's get started about Adonalsium, however you want to pronounce it. I
think I pronounce it differently every single time.
Yeah, same. I think sometimes I say Ado, sometimes I say Ado, and sometimes yeah. So, who or what is Adonalsium? Do you want to give us a little something?
Yeah. So, if you have watched our first video, we alluded to Adonalsium in that video, but essentially you can kind of almost, I suppose, think of Adonalsium as the one and only original god or big power in the Cosmere, and all, that Adonalsium, he, she, they, it, class, we don't really know, was, predates the Cosmere, I believe. Yeah. So you can kind of think of them as like the creator, I suppose, of the Cosmere, and that's where all power originated.
Exactly. So we don't really know what or who Adonalsium was. We don't know if it was a person. We don't know if it was just
a dragon. Have a theory? I think probably a dragon, right?
Yeah, that's why I said that.
Probably a dragon. But the thing about Cosmere dragons is that they have human forms.
Exactly. So I never actually thought about this, about who or what. I mean, I have thought about who or what Adonalsium was, but never until Wind and Truth. I think that after reading Wind and Truth, and after delving a bit more into Cosmere lore, I have kind of gotten more into the theory of dragon slash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but also because I love dragons, so I'm like, I mean, if the original creation,
haven't really had a whole load of clarity in terms of what is the situation with dragons in the Cosmere. since, there's only really become a conversation in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. We know of, correct me if I'm wrong. We know of one dragon? Two. Oh yeah, two. Absolutely, yes. Two dragons in the Cosmere, and yeah, so we don't really know what Adonalsium is or was. As said, did you have another theory except for dragon?
No, I think that I will have more. I think we will all have more after we get Isles of the Ember Dark, which is like towards the end of this year.
Why do you think that?
Well, because it partially takes place on Yolen.
Okay. Nice.
And it's kind of like way back in the past of the Cosmere, so I'm
Okay.
guessing we'll get a little bit more at that point.
Makes me even more excited to read that when it comes
Oh,
out.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too.
So
I'm really excited. So something else, you have mentioned it, that Adonalsium created the Cosmere, and basically everything in it, created the blueprint for everything in the Cosmere, which we will get to in a few, about how other things were created. But all investiture is derived from Adonalsium. That is something. And also, the way Adonalsium created the Cosmere was with the help of the Dawn Shards, which are like primal commands. Do you want to? This is not my.
Dawn Shards really confuse me. I'll be
Same.
honest. Like, I find them. I think it's partially because we don't have a whole lot to go on. I mean, really, the only solid information we have about Dawn Shards came from the novella Dawn Shard, which I have read twice. The first time I read it, I was hopelessly confused. And the second time I read it, I was slightly less hopelessly confused, but still pretty confused.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're just power in a raw form, I guess.
Yeah. In the form of a command. So one of them is exist, that I know, and then the other ones I've already forgotten.
Yeah, I don't know either.
We know two of the four, and I know one is exist, and the other one I don't remember. So yeah, this is kind of the. Oh, sorry, I had to pop my back. That hurt. This is what we know from pre. I'll say it, pre-shattering Adonalsium. This is what we know. And I don't think we know much more. At least I don't know much more. So
no. I mean, I think most of what we know has come from words of Brandon rather than from books, which makes it really difficult to keep track of.
Yeah. So but I think it's so interesting because I think that Adonalsium was not really mentioned many times in the Cosmere in works, but then the few times you would have it, you would see it, you'd be like, "Oh, here we have something," And I live for that stuff. Like, for example, in Wind and Truth, which, as we said, we would spoil. I'm okay to spoil Wind and Truth. So spoiler for Wind and Truth.
Spoilers.
Okay. I think that for me, something I loved in Wind and Truth, it was getting the Tanavas chapters, because I am a sucker for lore and like origin story, like that kind of stuff. I'm like, give it to me.
I was really surprised.
That we got so much.
I was not expecting to get chapters from his perspective at all.
I love that kind of stuff. And I know some people don't, but I'm a lore person. And so for me, getting all that information, I just. And so every time that Adonalsium was mentioned in a direct or abstract way in any of the books, I was like, like, like I just love it so much. So, yeah.
Which is possibly why you like Mistborn Era 1 so much, because it is it's almost like it is origin story. But you know.
I love it so much. I mean, what's there to say? I love that
But
series.
you've brought up the Shattering. Should we move on to
Let's move
discuss
on to the
the
Shattering.
Shattering? So
Exactly.
what is the Shattering, Joanna? Tell us.
So there were 16 people who were like, for different reasons, they said, you know what? This god or godlike power form person question mark needs to, and they decided to kill Ado. And they tried once, and I mean, not them specifically. Someone tried once and didn't succeed, and then these 16 people did succeed. And this happened 10,000 years before the true desolation on Yolan. And the way it happened is that, so we call it shattering because the power of Adonalsium, again, question mark, was splintered into 16 shards. And you might have noticed that in the Cosmere, the number 16 is a big number.
Very important.
I mean, there we go.
So is
And
10, but we don't really know why.
sorry?
So is 10, but we don't really know why. Or
Yeah.
10 is particularly important on Roshar, but
Yeah.
who knows?
But 16 in general is a big number. So yeah, it happened for different reasons, right? There were some people that were just like, this is not good to have one person have all the power. We need to bring an end to this. And then some people were like, I want this power for myself. So might as well get in on it, you know? And we know that there were more than these 16 people involved in the killing of Adonalsium, because we know that Hoyd was there, but Hoyd didn't get a shard. Well, he didn't want a shard.
Yeah. Well, he was offered a seat at the table, as it were, and he said he didn't want it. And I think that we
Jon
only just
Snow.
found out that it was 10,000 years before the true desolation in, was it in Wind and Truth that we found
I don't
out that it was
remember.
that figure? I feel like we did. Or anyway, it was recent because we
Yeah.
didn't really know how old Hoyd is
Yeah.
until recently.
Quite
And I mean, we
recently.
still don't really know, but we do now know that he's at least over 10,000
Yeah. Crazy.
years old.
Speak about being old. We're complaining about being 30.
Well, he's happy and tired.
Yeah. And his back must be cracking a lot. So yeah, there were multiple reasons as to why people wanted to do this. And how did they do it? They used the dawn charts, funnily enough, to kill Adonalsium. We don't know how they did it. The specifics
Yeah,
we don't
not
know.
specifically, no.
And the weapon doesn't exist anymore, but there's like a remnant of it on in the physical realm. And this is something that I forgot to mention earlier in Adonalsium, is that Adonalsium created the three realms. So the physical, cognitive, no, yeah,
Yeah.
and spiritual realm. So
Mhm.
I was like, did I make the word cognitive up? But I'm like, no, of course not. Wow. So yeah, so there is a remnant of this weapon in the physical realm, but it doesn't exist as such anymore. And they did it using the dawn shards. And we know that bringing the dawn shards together is quite dangerous, because we saw it in Wind and Truth when Hoyd and Risen.
No, it wasn't Hoyd and Rissin, was it? It was Rissin and some person we haven't met yet.
Okay. That met up and were like, whoa,
Yeah.
sorry, gotta not hang out together. Bye bye. This is dangerous. So they had to really go.
Well, they try to join, don't they, when they're in each other's presence?
The shards, you mean?
I think so.
I
The
think
Dawn
so.
Shard. Yeah.
I would have to reread that part, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened with the shattering. So these people are like, we're done, or I want the power, or XYZ reason, and they decided to kill their god, and the end result was a god that splintered into 16 shards.
Mhm.
And maybe we can move on to talking about the shards.
Mhm.
So there's 16 of them. And something that is to be said is that the shards could have. We have the 16. We will say their names for the ones that we know. We will say where they are. I will let you do that part if you want, or we can split it up. But something we know is that the shards could have been different let's say if someone else had been there, or the 16 people that picked up a shard of Adonalsium they're called also the first that ascended, because by picking up this power they became like gods themselves, or like godlike, maybe more like it.
Mm.
And they picked up the shards that either they just could, like, they resonated more, or shards that they thought they might be able to control the best. That's how they chose who picked up which shard.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to go over the shards, or would you like to?
Yeah, we can go through that. I'm going to need your help because I'm recording on my phone, which means that my notes are not accessible to me while we are filming.
Okay.
But
Well, maybe we can go a bit more into what are the shards and how the shards, and then we can go into this, because I feel like this we will jump into the future of the Cosmere by talking about the shards. So maybe we can talk a bit more about the shards in and of themselves. So all shards started with the same amount of investiture, but some have been splintered.
Yes. So I think that because each shard is like a 16th of the power of Adonalsium, and they all have kind of different characteristics, but then they're also somewhat, and to various extents, controlled or shaped by the individuals that hold them, but also vice versa, right? Like the individuals that hold them are also controlled and shaped by the power. And the powers themselves have characteristics, and the characteristics become apparent from the names of them, which we'll go into in a bit. And then they all sort of spread out across the Cosmere and made their own decisions about how they were going to use or not use that power, and some of them decide to let some of their power go for various reasons, which are also somewhat kind of tied to the circumstances of the world and things that are going on where they are in the Cosmere, which I guess we'll kind of get into some of that in a bit as well. But initially they were 16 evenly powered beings in the Cosmere, and I mean, I don't think that Wind and Truth is the most recent, but the True Desolation is around about where Wind and Truth is. So we know that at least there's been 10,000 years, and there's actually been more than that since the Shattering. And over that period of time, there has been a significant shift in that shattering of power. So it's not just 16 evenly powered beings anymore. Some have lost some of their power, some have gained some power, etc.
And Odium tried to, like, he went after some of them, but I guess we'll talk maybe a bit more about that later. So something else is that when the shards are on a planet, it creates a perpendicularity. And maybe you can explain what a perpendicularity is. I think it's because I have a bit of confusion, like, to explain it. I think I have it in my head, but to put it in words is a bit harder.
Yeah. So a perpendicularity is, you can think of it a little bit like a gateway, I suppose, between the physical realm and the cognitive realm. Okay, so the cognitive realm is, I mean, kind of what it says on the tin, right? It's what goes on in people's brains, the stuff that we don't see but that we know kind of controls how things work, etc. So Roshar is a really good example of seeing how the cognitive realm manifests itself in the real world, because that's where Spren are from originally, and then they can kind of leak into the physical realm. when there's strong emotion pulling them through, or for various other reasons. The spiritual realm we know much less about, and it's much more difficult to get there, and there isn't an automatic perpendicularity between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. But when, as you say, a shard settles on a planet, they will have a place where their power pools. And so if they lose any of it, it kind of returns to that place, and that's where they can collect it from. And my understanding is that that is what creates the perpendicularity, which is this gateway between the physical and the cognitive realms, and that is what can then therefore be used particularly by world hoppers to get around the Cosmere in the pre-space age, so they can travel between one planet and another via the cognitive realm, because there isn't, the space, as in actually capital letter space, between planet and planet. It's all just cognitive realm.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. And I think like we also have some physical manifestations, except for the well. We have sometimes physical manifestations of the power on planets. So, for some examples I found were Atium and Lerasium on Scadario, the Tears of Edgley on Malthus, and you've said it before, the spread on Roshar. That's
Mhm.
our manifestation of the power of the shards that are there.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else you want to say about the shards before we get into the shards?
I can't think of anything. I can't
Mm.
promise I won't think of something later.
Yeah,
But
that's fine. We'll just come back to it. Okay, so I have them here, and we can talk a bit about them. So some some of the shards have changed their original
Mm,
vessel. So a lot of the people that picked up the shards in the first place are still the ones
yeah.
with the shards, but also in some cases the shard has been transferred to someone else who has
Hmm.
picked it up.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
some of
we
them we don't know. So they
yeah,
could be with their original holders, they could be with someone new.
yeah.
Who knows?
The good thing that we now know is that we know the names of the 16.
We do. We do.
We didn't know them for a long time, and
I think we just found them out in, was it Rhythm of War?
yeah, I think that was the one that gave us all of them.
I think
Okay.
so.
So, do we just go through the 16 and then we talk about them individually, or how do you want to do?
Let's just do them one at a time and discuss them
Okay.
as we name them, I think, yeah.
So, the first one we have here is Devotion on Cell.
Mm.
And the vessel is deceased, but was Aeona. And we hear about it in The Emperor's Soul,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Dominion. So Devotion and Dominion are both from Cell. We both hear about them in Emperor's Soul.
And that's why we have two different types of magic on Cell, because we have two shards that were there, and so they each came with their own type of magic. Now, don't ask me which way round they are, because that I have no idea. But we have the Aeon or Aeon
Which is
magic, which
funny
is,
because the vessel was called Aeona.
so
So that must have been
presumably
Devotion.
that must have been devotion, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
makes sense.
And that's what we see used in Elantris. So that's, I mean, we kind of, not until the end of Elantris, right? So this is like, if you don't want plot spoilers for Elantris, don't listen to this bit. But towards the end of the book, we start to see how the Aeon Door actually works, which is the drawing of symbols which are tied to the geography of the land that create whatever effect you're trying to create through the use of that Aeon Door language. So that's one of the magic systems on
So
Cell, and that one is also where we get Sions from, and Scions are super important in the Cosmo because we've actually seen them. Not on Cell in particular, we've seen them in the Stormlight archive. Actually, a fair amount. I mean,
Yeah.
seen them. We know that they're there. We haven't actually seen them, but we know that they're there, and they are, you know, that at the center of the glowing ball of the Scion is an Aeon, which gives it its power. So that's Aeon Door. Do you want to talk about the?
No, I don't feel confident enough. You can go for it.
Okay. So the other, I don't know if it's called forgery. I think so. I don't know. So that's the one that we see in the Emperor's Soul. So that's the type of magic that we see in the Emperor's Soul. But we also see it in Mistborn Era 2, particularly in Lost Metal. And essentially it's a similar thing. So it's still writing, but it's creation. It's a little bit like, do you know what? This has only just occurred to me. It's a little bit like what we see in the, what's the name of that series? You know, Foundry Side.
Ah, yes, the Founders Trilogy.
Yeah, the Founders Trilogy. It's a little bit like what we see there, which is that they can, through the use of forgery and seals, they can change something. So, like, I'm sat in this chair, right? Like, if I wanted to forge this chair into believing it was in its own past, it would maybe turn into a pile of sticks and some cotton bushes or whatever. I don't know, whatever this thing is made from, right? So you can use forgery, and we haven't seen a huge amount of forgery yet because really it's only in those 2 books and only in the Lost Metal very, very, very briefly. It can be used on people, but that's much more difficult and much more complicated, which is kind of the point of the Emperor's Soul. Yeah. And so presumably that one must come from
Dominion.
Dominion.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Then we come to my wheelhouse. We have preservation and ruin. So for ruin, so both of these are on schedule. And formerly ruin was held by Ati or Ati. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
I think.
There you go. And preservation has gotten around. Preservation was held by Laras, then Kelsier, and then Vin. My girl Vin, for a very short amount of time, before both were united and combined by Sazed. And now, so Ruin and Preservation together became Harmony. That's now kind of turning into chaos. But yes, let's say Harmony. So this is the first time we saw one vessel, 2 shards. We see it again. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Actually, soon we'll talk about it. But yeah, we see this at the very end of Mistborn Era 1, which is the whole point, I guess. We see Vin take up the power of preservation, and then she gives it up and says it combines everything and becomes Harmony. Did you want to talk a bit about, again, the individual?
Yeah, I can, or you can.
I think you're the scholar, so I'm asking you to explain.
Well, I think that what's interesting about preservation and ruin is that they were on this, they were always on the same planet.
They created it together.
Yeah.
Because I read a bit about it, that they inspired themselves. This is what I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about Adonalsium created the Cosmian, created the first humans on Yolen, and Preservation and Ruin and their vessels went together, created Scadrial, created the humans on Scadrial together, based on the blueprint they saw on Yolen.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. So Preservation wanted to create, but wasn't able to create alone because it's just one entity, and therefore it doesn't have balance. So it needed ruin, which was like its opposite essentially, to create that balance, to enable him to create Scadrial and the people that lived there. But the deal that Laras and AT entered into was, AT said, yeah, okay, fine, I'll help you create this world and these people, but what I want in exchange for that is that I want to be able to destroy them eventually, which is essentially what we see happening from the end of Well of Ascension through the Hero of Ages. And so this is an example of where the powers start off equal, but they can be reduced or increased. So in Laras's case, he reduced his power to create a prison for 80, which is the Well of Ascension, so that 80 would not be able to destroy the humans on Scadrial, because preservation wanted to unspoilingly preserve them. So that is why then Laras ends up less powerful than 80, because he had to give up some of his powers to the Well of Ascension. He also gave up some of his powers to the Mist to protect the people from the heat that was created when the planet got moved closer, because what's his name? It's gone out of my head. The Lord Ruler.
Yeah. Rashek? Is that his name?
Rashek, yeah.
Okay.
Rashek, yeah. Moved the planet too close to the sun. So
why did he do that? Icarus.
Yeah. Well, he didn't mean to, right? Like, he just was overwhelmed. And this is the thing, like, these powers are overwhelming for people, and they take some time to kind of get used to, which I can't wait to see all of the destructive shit that must have happened when the Shattering happened, because can you imagine? I think that's going to be a fun read.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
So that's essentially that's Lerasium, and then 80 is trapped, or most of 80 is trapped in the Well of Ascension, but also in the atium that exists.
I mean, we have Lerasium and Atium. Once again, very derivative of the vessel. So
yeah. So atium is a god metal, which allows you to see into the future. Ooh. And and that's another one of the kind of, that I don't want to say that's a pooling of the power, because that's not the perpendicularity, right? The perpendicularity is the Well of Ascension.
Yeah.
Which we see because that's where Hoyd just like randomly pops up and he's like, hey, I'm using this.
Bye-bye.
Kelsey, get out the way. Yeah. So that's the deal with Laras and 80. And then when Laras dies, his power is very, very briefly picked up by Kelsia and then by Vin. And then Vin dies, killing 80.
Yep.
And then Thazid picks up both of them and forms harmony.
It must be so tricky to be the vessel of both preservation and ruin, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why Thazid is struggling so much, because he's really struggling to kind of control those two competing powers.
Especially because does the shard of, was it Laras who had less power, or is it the shard of preservation that has less power?
I think it was Leras, not the Shard.
Not the Shard? Okay, because if the
I don't
Shard...
think that the Shard was shattered.
Okay, no, I don't think it... No, it wasn't.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It was just Leras gave up that power to be used for certain purposes,
Okay.
which those don't exist anymore because 80 isn't trapped anymore and the mists
Right.
don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think just imagine you're Sazed and you're like, I have these two diametrically opposed powers that I need to control. Poor Sazed.
Right.
Poor Sazed. Which is why now people are saying it's more like chaos than harmony, because he's just struggling so much with it. Understandably so, I think, having to handle those.
So, I mean, what's going to happen on Roshar?
So, speaking of Roshar, those are the next ones here on the list. We have Odium, we have Cultivation, and we have Honor. And all those shards are on Roshar. Well, I mean, Cultivation is not really... It's more like Honor and Odium. So let's talk about Honor and Odium. So Odium was... Okay, I'm opening a parenthesis here. Why is it raise, braise, raise?
I don't know. It bugs me.
And it's all on the same plant, like on the same,
I know.
It's like,
it's annoying.
If berets were on, I don't know, in Nalthis, no, it's Maraise, raise, and braise. I'm like, Jesus. Okay, anyway, closing parenthesis. So, Odium used to be held by raise on braise. And Maraise is looking for them. Okay. Odium, raise, braise. Got it. Okay. And then we have Honor, who was held by Tanavast on Roshar. Then...
Ashen originally.
Right. And then... Yeah, when they burnt it to ashes. Ashen, burnt it. Okay. I'm done with my bad jokes today. Jeez, we can never record this late again. Like, this is not okay.
We're both tired, folks. Just give us some grace here.
Oh boy.
We're descending into chaos.
Ruin and preservation. Okay. So, Honor. Let's talk about Honor. Honor also got around. I mean, what is it with preservation and Honor? All the ones that you would think as more positive things, like boop, beep, boop. So Honor was, was Tenevast, then very briefly picked up by Dalinar Kholin, then picked up by Teravangian. Odium, raise, brace, as we said, and picked up by Teravangian. So we have, again, a combination of shards. We have Odium and Honor together, and they became Retribution.
Retribution, that was it.
Yeah. So we have now two, which we will talk about later. We have two series in which the two shards on planet have been merged to become one.
Meanwhile, Cultivation has run away from Roshar.
Exactly. So do we want to talk a bit about...
Cultivation, by the way, is one of our two dragons that we know about.
Exactly. The other one is Frost, no?
Yeah.
Yes. That's why when I was like, I was like, you dummy, two dragons. So do you want to talk a bit about these Rosharian shards? We can include Cultivation in here if you want.
I mean, I think we still have like a lot to figure out about these shards, even though we know more about them than most. I think we definitely know more about Harmony, Preservation, and Ruin than we know about Odium, Honor, Cultivation, and what was
Retribution.
Redemption. That would be way too positive for Odium, wouldn't it? Retribution, that makes more sense. So I'll start with Cultivation because I think we probably know the least.
Yeah,
I would say about her. I mean, as I say, we know that she's a dragon, which probably accounts for why things with her go a little bit differently than the other shards. And we know that she has somewhat separated part of her power from herself to create the Night Watcher.
And what else? The Night Watcher, and
No, I think that's it.
that's it?
But then she uses the Night Watcher, doesn't she, to help her create, do whatever it is that she's done to lift, to make her Stormlight. Well, no, not Stormlight. That's exactly the point, isn't it? She doesn't use Stormlight, she uses Lifelight, which I think is going to be so interesting to see how that works in the back half, because they don't have access to Stormlight on Roshar anymore.
Yeah.
Which means that no one has access to Investiture, but Lift will, because hers is Lifelight. But then will she still have access to it with Cultivation gone? I don't know. Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, I digress. So that's Cultivation. And that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything else.
Well, we know that am I making this up? Cultivation and Honor were like...
Oh, they were a thing.
They were a thing. They're like,
Which, that's so interesting.
Right? But like, I mean, it makes sense because all these people were people in the beginning, and then maybe they had these feelings for each other. And so Cultivation and Honor were a thing, and they kind of wanted to be together.
Yep.
And Odium and Honor were like fighting.
They're like enemies, not quite. Kind of, they don't like each other.
Yeah.
And I think all of that kind of relationship dynamic was pre-Shattering.
Yes.
Like they Honor, well, not Honor and Cultivation, but the vessels, they were in a relationship pre-Shattering. And I think that the feud, whatever you want to call it, between the vessel of Odium and Honor were feuding pre-Shattering.
Yes.
Also,
and we got a lot more of that. Right. And I mean, of course, if you have a feud with someone and all of a sudden both of you become gods, it's like, oh, we're playing on a different
level now.
Yeah. And we get a lot of that in Wind and Truth. We get a lot of backstory about this feud between Tanavast and Ray. Rays. Right. And I found that so interesting, to be honest. I loved hearing about the relationship between Cultivation and Honor, and then the whole fight between Honor and Odium, all these things that they had going on. That was just fascinating to me.
Yeah. And I think that, Odium is kind of almost like the big bad of the Cosmere. Like,
which we'll get to in a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. It's just, I feel like Odium is the one that everyone is afraid of.
Yeah. So I mean, he has also the name, right? Odium.
Right. But I just think it's going to be so interesting to see how joining Odium and Honor, what is that going to do? What is that going to mean?
Yes, because I feel like we see that Harmony is struggling with ruin and preservation. And how is Teravangian going to balance out? Is he going to balance out?
Honor? Like, how do you balance those two things?
And I feel like Honor is so stubborn.
Right. And I think even Tanavast struggled with that, right? Like, it's quite rigid. Yes,
because this is the thing. It's like, as we said earlier, these shards could have been anything, right? It could have been, I don't know, anything. But okay, it's honor. But then what is honorable? And that's where it's so strict and so tricky, because this is what Dalinar was trying to show the Stormfather and the power that, okay, some things are maybe your definition of honor, but
well, and this is the thing, right? Like, to a certain extent only can the vessel control the shard, but also the shard controls the vessel. So where's that line with honor? Like, at what stage do we shift from Tanavast, or now Taravangian, telling the shard what is honorable, and the shard telling them what is honourable. I think it's gonna be really tricky.
Oh yes.
And I think that that's why Cultivation fled, because she's like, oh, hell no, I do not want to deal with the tantrum that's going to happen over there. Let me get out of this place.
I would do the same.
Right?
I would get out of there.
Come on.
I think it's going to be so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about, we'll circle back to this in just a little bit, because I feel like we know less about the other shards anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to this in a little bit, but I think it's going to be so interesting to see.
Very interesting.
How the other shards in the Cosmere, because this is something we know in Wind and Truth, that they say like all the shards in the Cosmere now have their eyes on Roshar, on Retribution, and being like, oh shit. Because I feel like a lot of shards, you always correct me if I'm wrong, you're the scholar, I'm the student. I feel like all the shards were like, oh, Odium is on Rays / on Roshar. Cool story. We don't have to deal with him. Woo! And now it's like, oh shit, he's coming for us.
Well, this is it, and I think that Dalinar was pretty smart in this way, because he recognized that the only way to deal with Odium is to get all of the shards involved, and there was just no incentive for the shards to get involved because they weren't being impacted by what Odium was up to. But now that Odium has also got the power of honor, and I say that intentionally because Odium is very powerful, and I think that there will be a lot of influence that Odium has over honor. So not Taravangian, but the actual powers themselves. So it's Dalinar has forced the other shards to take notice.
Yes. Which
Because
I think is needed, right? And
one problem too.
Yes, exactly. And this is something I'm opening another
can of worms.
There we go. Something I've been watching a lot of Bookborn's videos because she started reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and she's a huge Sanderson fan. And there's this like belief that you cannot be an A Song of Ice and Fire fan and a Sanderson fan because those things are not compatible. This is like a don't ask. So
clearly that's true.
Clearly, I myself, I was telling you this last week when we were recording our first video. My favorite series of all time are the Final Empire / I guess the Cosmere as like an overarching series, but the Mistborn series and A Song of Ice and Fire. Those are my favorite things of all time. So, and something I like about A Song of Ice and Fire, which is why this makes sense here, is that the one of the messages of the series is people are so worried about their little squabbles that they kind of ignore the bigger issues in the world that can be threatening to them. And I feel like this is what Dalinar has done. Dalinar has said, y'all are so focused on your own planets and on your own power trips, but we have a huge issue here and you need to pay attention now. We need to do something here. And you cannot just keep on saying, it's Roshar's problem, you know?
Yeah.
Because Odium has splintered other shards. So Odium is clearly a danger, and now he's everyone's problem, and everyone is forced to look, and nobody can just turn a blind eye to this. And that I really like. That everyone's being pulled together to fight in this war. This is why the whole Avengers thing we were saying last week is so, you know. Okay, we'll talk about this again a little bit later, and we'll just quickly go through the last charts we have, and then close off the video with the future. So we have endowments. That's on Office. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's very much to say about.
I mean, I suppose what's interesting about the magic system on Nulthis is that it's this system of breath, which is an easy way to numerically categorize the level of investiture. And as we move towards the future in the Cosmere, that is the method by which investiture is kind of measured.
Yeah. Okay. We have autonomy on Taldane. So we have this like in First of the Sun and these kinds of things.
Mhm.
Ambition, Threnody. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about those two.
Not so much autonomy. I think Threnody is Shadows for Silence, right?
Yeah.
So Threnody is, what did you say, ambition?
Yes, exactly.
And ambition has been destroyed by Odium.
Yeah.
And that is why the magic system on Threnody is so messed up. So we and the Cosmere at large have seen the devastating effects that destruction of a shard has. And that shard is gone. Right? Like it's just gone.
The thing is that the power cannot be lost. So I wonder.
Well, yeah, I mean the power still exists, but it is completely dissolved, I guess.
I need to
It's a
reread
mess.
that book.
Hot mess.
I really need to reread that because I don't have a full recollection of what happens.
Basically, on Threnody, so we said in the video last week that it's kind of almost as close as Sandor gets to horror.
Yeah.
And there are these destructive creatures on Threnody, and they're murderous, I suppose, is a good word. But you can't spill blood on Threnody because these kind of creature things are attracted by that, and also whenever you die, you become a shadow. So it's all very. I have no idea. I don't know if we know or even are supposed to know what the power on Threnody looked like before Ambition was destroyed. I'm not sure. But as of right now, it's a mess.
It's bad. It's a bad.
It's bad.
Okay. The next ones we have are a lot of it is unknown, so we will go through it a bit quicker, I guess. We have invention. We have mercy. We have valor. We have whimsy. We have virtuosity, and we have reason. So the only one of those that I know something to say about, except if you have about something else, is whimsy, where you and I were theorizing about this the other day.
Yeah.
We called each other at night, just like before bed, and we're like, "Guess what, whimsy."
Whimsy,
like,
there's some stuff going on with Whimsy, I tells you.
at 11:30 p.m., me with my silk bonnet on, retainer in, Sophia. Yeah, so the reason we say this is because in Wind and Truth, who says this to them?
I can't remember.
Someone says that Shallan and Adolin have whimsy.
Is her name May or something like that? It's the scholar that is with Adolin, his ex. I think it might be
Yes, but I don't remember her name.
I think it might be May or something like that.
Could be. Anyway, she says that Adolin and Shallan have whimsy, capital W, in common. What does that mean?
And I think whimsy has just been coming up a lot more recently in the books, and we've even heard Harmony telling Wit or Hoyd or Savandrius or whatever you want to call him that Harmony tried to contact Whimsy and didn't get any kind of response, and that was in
She left him on red.
She left him on red. Yeah,
she's like, you stay with your chaotic powers.
stay in your lane.
Leave me alone. I'm whimsical.
This is my dance space. That's your dance space.
I'm whimsical. Leave me alone.
So yeah, I'm positive something is going on with Whimsy. I don't know what. I couldn't tell you what, but something.
Yeah, and I wonder what Shallan and Aelin have to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now that Mrs. Shallan is pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that could be playing a role. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Anything else you want to say about the other shards?
I don't know anything about them other than their names.
Yeah. Okay, so the thing I added to the list that I didn't tell you about, I don't know if you saw the banner.
No, I'm on my phone, so I can't look at anything.
Perfect. So we started this conversation talking about Adonalsium, about the Shattering, and about the Shards, and something that we hear a lot in the Stormlight is unite them.
Oh, right.
And you and I, you longer than I, but I had this like epiphany a few, I don't know, like months ago, weeks ago, when I started getting back into my Cosmere shit. I messaged Sophia, and yeah, I mean, when she replied to me, I was like, I'm an idiot. And so I was like, Sophia, I think I know something. I have a theory. I was so proud of myself. I was like, I think unite them means the shards. And she was like, I've told you this before. I was like, you have? Like, I have no recollection of this. Like, none.
This has been my theory since, I don't even know, a long time.
Yeah.
Since my first reread of the Stormlight Archive, maybe, which was
Wow. A
like
while ago.
3 years ago, something like that. It's been a while. I've thought this for a long time.
And I think that this makes absolute sense. I had a theory before reading Wind and Truth. When I was just researching again about, like, it all started with the video of like, what do you need to remember before reading Wind and Truth? And then I went into a rabbit hole. I started listening to a ton of podcasts and videos and doing a lot of research on the 17th chart and the Copper Mind about everything. And I I don't know. I was just starting to think. I mean, it's kind of poetic, right? Like we have a god, we shatter the god into these shards that are creating so much chaos, so many issues we have, especially with odium and now retribution and with harmony slash chaos. That, and we see now in two series. At this point, we had only had Sazed combining the two shards, but now we have Terravengean also combining shards, and so combining shards, I really think I agree with you. My theory is that we are bringing back together, maybe not Adonalsium as they were before or it
Yeah.
was before, but recombining the
Mm-hmm.
shards. Something that to me confirmed my theory or made it more like I'm more convinced about my own theory in my head was in When in Truth when Hoyt, whatever you want to call him, when he says we used to have a god, or the closest thing we ever had to a true god, we decided to shatter, and that was a big mistake. He says something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember exactly how he words it, but it's something in that area,
Mm-hmm.
Like, and to me, it's like, yes, unite them means the shards. I am convinced that we're going towards a bringing together all the shards again.
Yeah. To me, it just is. What's happening in the Stormlight Archive is so grand in scale that it just feels like unite them can't just mean the Knights Radiant. I mean, for starters, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And then originally Dalinar thought it meant the High Princes,
But that makes no sense.
is way too small fry, and even the Knights Radiant, even if it made sense, which to me it doesn't, it's too small. I think it's just too small.
Especially in that, I think when you're reading The Way of Kings, it makes sense if it's like the High Princes or the Knights Radiant. But now that we see where the Stormlight Archive is bringing us, and that the Stormlight Archive is the, I'll say, the launching point for the whole of the shards being like, we have to do something about retribution, it has to be this.
Yeah.
It has to be the Stormlight Archive now where we are is so big scale, as you say. It's Cosmere. It's no longer just Roshar and its little battles and going on bridge runs. It's like the power that the whole Cosmere is going to try to control somehow is here, it has to be that.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know who's
Mm.
going to do it. I don't know if we're going to bring back the Dawn Shards for this. It would make sense
Well, it will have
since
to be, surely.
I expect it because the Dawn Shards killed Adonalsium.
Mm.
Adonalsium used the Dawn Shards to create everything.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the Dawn Shards are going to be hugely important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, and that would be like kind of if we ever get an end to the Cosmere, it would be so poetic to have the beginning with the Shattering, and then everything that happens post Shattering, creating all these words, all these planets, all these people that then ultimately come together to undo what those 16 people did
Mm-hmm.
thousands and thousands of years ago when they killed their god.
Yeah. That's what I think the end game of the Cosmere is.
Yes. Because we have to have an end game. I think in the beginning when it was,
Well, and
oh,
he knows what it is.
right.
Sando has said that he knows what the end game is.
I mean, that I have no doubts about. But I think that when before the Cosmere became like the MCU, basically, I think it was kind of like, oh, it's just a solar system where there's a lot of planets and all the planets have their own story and but it's all set in the same universe. But now that's
Yeah.
not the case. Now he's bringing all these things together, and there has to be one end game for the Cosmere. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that permeates the entire Cosmere is this.
Yeah.
So the only thing that makes sense, if you're gonna have a big bad, if you're gonna have a goal for the Cosmere,
Yeah.
what can it be other than the shards and reuniting them?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I think that's where we're headed.
Full circle, baby.
So yeah, that is, I think, what I have. Do you have anything else about Ado and the shards and the shattering and the uniting and anything else related to this topic that we've talked about today?
I mean, not that I can think of. I think that, as I say, we'll potentially know a bit more about the Shattering by the end of this year because we'll have Isles of the Emberdark, and we might have more about ambition as well because Isles of the Emberdark also deals with First of the Sun. Like, that's another location for that book. And I was really surprised at Dragonsteel Nexus when Sando was talking about like the future of the Cosmere in terms of which books we're going to get, that actually the last thing to be published is going to be Mistborn, the final Mistborn series is going to be the very last thing that we see, which I was really surprised by because I kind of thought it would be Dragonsteel. And
I hope we get that first. I am
we will be,
dying to get that backstory.
well, we will be. So I think that if I'm remembering correctly,
Next is Era 3. Yes, Era 3.
well, I think next is Elantris.
I thought that was pushed back.
No, Elantris. So he's writing Ghost Bloods now.
Yeah.
But he wants to write all three of them and then release all three of them in the same
Yeah.
year, I'm thinking. But I think that we get Elantris 2 first.
Are you
But
sure?
either way, we're getting Elantris and Ghost Bloods before Dragonsteel, but we're getting Dragonsteel before Space Age Mistborn.
Do we get Dragonsteel before Stormlight Part 2?
I think so.
I am so. I think it is the thing I'm most excited about
I am
because
going to read Dragonsteel Prime this year, I think.
we said we might read that together, right? And that we might then do a video here on on that book.
Yeah,
And I
we
think
should.
that would be fun.
Yeah.
And we might do some more individual book videos and characters and things like that. Right now, we
I think
decided
we
to
should
do
do Way of King's Prime as well. Now that we've had Wind and Truth and we're not too worried about getting
confused.
confused.
Yeah. I think something that we are going to keep doing for a bit, I don't know for how long, is to do more of these overarching cosmere conversations, and then we might get more into
Specifics.
specifics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, shall we wrap it up here? Let us know if, I don't know, if you agree with our theory of uniting them, if you have any information that we don't have, if there's anything you want to know. And I think that's it. Do you have
Sound
anything
off
to?
in the comments, folks.
Hmm, indeed, indeed. Well, thank you, Sophia, for hanging out and for
Thank you.
explaining so much about the different shards and the powers and the magic systems. And I don't know. We don't know yet what our next topic will be, but it'll come to us at 11:30 p.m. in our silk bonnets. So
Yeah.
it'll come. Great. Well, thank you so much, and
Thank
we will see
you.
you next time. And if you like these conversations, I mean, you can subscribe to us. We're doing this for kicks and giggles, but if you like, we would love the support. So thank you so much, and until next time, bye.
Bye.